Levy's system attacked the Necromancer before the possession could finish. It devoured half the ancient soul before the mage escaped. The stolen memories held 7 dark spells and 7th-tier meditation. Levy stayed unconscious, while Mia kept her sword ready. Wendy sensed no invader, but nobody trusted the silence. The spells covered death, poison, shadows, summoning, illusion, and transformation. Levy woke carrying years of the Necromancer's experience inside him. He survived possession and gained the enemy's darkest techniques instead. Levy opened his eyes with his head resting on Wendy's lap and immediately found Mia's sword near his throat. She refused to assume the man waking up was still Levy after witnessing a possession attempt. Levy explained that the invader had failed because the system had consumed most of its soul. Wendy confirmed his spiritual sea no longer carried the signs of another consciousness controlling him. Only then did Mia lower her weapon, although her suspicion did not disappear completely. The memories left behind also revealed what Misty Valley had been hiding beneath its fog. Levy identified the damaged structure there as a passage connected directly to Hell. If it reopened completely, the northern frontier could become an entrance for forces Stormwind could never handle alone. He avoided destroying anything blindly because the damaged passage was already unstable and poorly understood. Before leaving the valley, Levy met the surviving members of the White Wolf tribe. Their people needed somewhere safe, while Stormwind needed professionals who could strengthen its thin, defensive line. Levy offered sanctuary on one condition. Anyone serving as a professional had to accept a formal service contract. The tribe accepted because staying in the mountains offered them fewer choices and much greater danger. Levy immediately organized their fighters into a White Wolf squadron instead of letting their remain scattered. Turo took responsibility for the new group while the civilian adults began learning Stormwind's farming safai. The arrangement gave the tribe food and protection, while giving Levy another disciplined military unit. Stormwind was expanding quickly, but every new settlement also created more ground that needed protection. Levy still had dangerous loose ends from the fighting around Misty Valley and handled them before relaxing. A captured 5th-tier divine eye mage carried information too valuable to waste on a simple execution. Levy stripped away everything useful before arranging for Angelus's people to take custody of the prisoner. Rose arrived soon afterward and immediately noticed how much stronger Stormwind's hidden defenses had become. She also saw the dead divine eye mage and understood that Levy's territory was no longer an easy target. When Rose questioned him about destroyed Lanchi forces, Levy denied knowing anything that could implicate Stormwind directly. He had learned that surviving the frontier required information control almost as much as walls and weapons. The stolen Necromancer memories did more than name spells. They also supplied years of dangerous practical casting experience. Death Illusion attacked perception. While Death Touch converted close contact into a weapon Levy could not safely demonstrate on allies. Summon, the Dead gave him another route to controlled undead, separate from the larger talent he would develop later. Corpse Poison turned bodies into lingering hazards, making battlefield cleanup part of the spell's tactical value. Shadow Binding offered restraint, useful against enemies. Levy wanted captured rather than immediately killed. Shadow Explosion weaponized prepared darkness, while Shadow Form gave Levy a method for movement and survival through shadows. He kept those functions private because 7 unknown spells were more valuable than 7 publicly documented ones. The Necromancer's 7th-tier ghostly meditation method also gave Levy a complete dark cultivation path instead of isolated tricks. That method became especially valuable because his Chaos Foundation could absorb elements ordinary mages kept strictly separated. Levy never assumed borrowed experience made him invincible. The ancient owner had still escaped despite losing most of his soul. The White Wolf tribe's arrival also forced Stormwind to solve housing and food rather than treating new fighters like free resources. Human serfs and demi-human newcomers worked beside each other, testing whether Levy's contracts could become actual social stability. Turo's squadron trained under Stormwind discipline, while preserving the combat strengths the tribe already possessed. Levy paid Panda the 6th-tier fire magic core he still owed, keeping another dangerous relationship financially clean. The hidden familiar near Stormwind confirmed that outside mages were already studying the territory, instead of merely hearing rumors. Levy let the Watcher survive, because following one controlled trail could reveal more than destroying one disposable creature. During the ambush, Mia and Moto forced the fire mage to divide attention before Levy accelerated into close range. Levy pinned the wounded mage through the shoulder, after deliberately avoiding a lethal ranged finish. Domination worked because he had prepared an empty contract slot before the fight, rather than improvising afterward. The captured mage revealed that royal persecution had driven his organization deeper underground, not eliminated it. Back home, Levy ordered a proper cavalry squadron built around the riding talent already present among his soldiers. 300 war horses were too valuable to remain scattered through units unable to exploit their speed. The cavalry project also exposed how badly Stormwind needed trained officers, instead of merely increasing headcount. Elsewhere, Levy moved the Narrowhole, roughly 20 kilometers away from populated territory for a different reason. Its growing dragon aura could attract predators powerful enough to erase the benefit of keeping it nearby. 3 days later, Little Coon reached the 2nd tier and released an even stronger dragon presence. That development confirmed Levy had been right to move the creature before attention arrived from the mountains. A strange watcher soon appeared around the territory, and Levy suspected it belonged to a hidden mage. Rather than killing the familiar, he let it escape so we could trace the person controlling it. 2 days later, the returning patrol finally led him toward the magician, hiding beyond Stormwind's normal routes. By then, the territory fielded more professionals, but Levy still refused to waste stronger fighters on routine problems. Clay's Night Force was also becoming loyal to Stormwind itself, rather than behaving like borrowed tulip manpower. Levy's next personal goal was the Flame Potion, which could accelerate his night advancement. He took Mia, Wendy, Moto, and Clay's magical beast, Knights, into the mountains to gather materials. The hunt lasted 15 days, because Levy wanted enough ingredients to make the expedition worth its risk. When they returned, the group carried materials for roughly 180 doses of the needed potion. That stockpile was enough to support Levy's push toward the 4th tier Grand Knight realm. Before he could focus entirely on cultivation, news arrived from Pig-Headed Valley about another magical attack. A single 4th tier fire archmage had struck the area and was searching for something important. Levy suspected the stranger was connected to the same hidden forces circling Misty Valley and Stormwind. Instead of waiting for the mage to choose the battlefield, Levy prepared an ambush with his strongest mobile fighters. He also rearranged existing domination contracts to free a slot for the target if capture became possible. Taking the mage alive offered far more value than killing him. Before understanding who had sent him, Mia opened the attack while Moto and the mounted fighters closed the routes the fire mage might use. The enemy tried to retreat, but Levy's meteor arrows struck his thigh and broke the clean escape. Once the mage was restrained, Levy used the available domination slot, rather than gambling on ordinary interrogation. The captive revealed that the damaged Hell Passage was beginning to react again inside Misty Valley. Also connected the threat to the Shadow Temple, an organization Levy wanted nowhere near Stormwind. Levy ordered his new slave to cancel whatever preparation could still be interrupted without exposing the capture. The information changed Misty Valley from an isolated mystery into a threat linked with powerful outside actors. Levy had no intention of fighting those actors alone, simply because the passage happened to sit near his land. He searched the captive's possessions and found wealth, magical resources, spells, and a useful storage ring. Among the most valuable items was a 5th tier fire meditation method that matched Levy's expanding magical path. The mage also carried a bag of the dead, containing trapped spirits, and a 4th tier corpse demon. Because of the Necromancer memories, Levy understood the artifact's structure and possible military value immediately. He released the dominated mage back toward his organization, under orders to continue pretending nothing had changed. Keeping the man openly in Stormwind would have announced that Levy knew far more about the Shadow Temple than he should. As a hidden servant, the same enemy could become an information channel inside the organization that sent him. Levy then asked Klein to report abnormal death energy around Misty Valley through official kingdom channels. He deliberately left out details that would reveal every secret Stormwind had already uncovered there. His goal was simple: make stronger institutions investigate before the crisis became Stormwind's problem alone. If the kingdom sent experts, they could stand between the frontier and whatever eventually came through hell. Back in the territory, Levy offered John a cultivation path that completely changed the young mage's ceiling. He provided the first 4 stages of a captured explosive meditation technique in exchange for accumulated service merit. Switching methods meant rebuilding progress, but the complete technique could eventually reach the 9th tier. For a common mage facing a low ceiling, That future mattered more than preserving a few comfortable years. John accepted, understanding that Stormwind was offering access normally controlled by rich families and ancient organizations. Levy also folded additional elemental methods into his own increasingly strange Chaos Meditation Foundation. Every successful integration made his magic harder to classify by the standards ordinary mages used. At the same time, he continued night training. Instead of allowing magic to replace his physical path, months of accumulated preparation finally carried him into the 4th-tier Grand Knight realm. The breakthrough triggered another system talent, giving Levy an immediate increase across several kinds of combat power. Ultimate power initially doubled his physical strength, battle aura, and magical mental force at the same time. Levy immediately spent energy essence, improving the talent, instead of leaving a useful multiplier at its basic form. After successive upgrades, the effect reached roughly 5 times its original combat amplification. Recognition, domination, speed, defense, and raw force were beginning to stack inside one increasingly unusual fighter. Levy still avoided displaying everything, because an enemy cannot prepare properly for abilities it has never seen. While he trained, North Castle approached completion and became the military center of Stormwind's northern defenses. The fortress concentrated storm cannons, ballistae, workshops, barracks, and training grounds behind reinforced walls. Levy ordered another 3,000 serfs purchased before winter, shut down large construction projects. Part of that population would provide labor, while younger recruits could eventually feed the army and new settlements. Then Clay returned with news that forced Levy to leave those plans behind temporarily. The Church of Dawn was waiting near the Cane River and specifically wanted Levy to appear in person. Klein's report about Misty Valley had climbed much higher through official channels than Levy expected. The man waiting there was Pastor Nelson, a 9th-tier priest whose presence immediately changed the scale of the investigation. Levy expected questioning, but Nelson instead flooded his spiritual sea with controlled holy light. The priest told him to comprehend the divine power rather than resist it, turning an inspection into unexpected training. When the light withdrew, Levy retained a holy light meditation technique and a divinely granted curse removal spell. Even the accompanying Dawn priests reacted because receiving a divine spell suggested extremely unusual affinity. Levy cared less about prophecy than the fact that his chaos path had gained another usable magical element. Nelson then explained that Angelus had asked him to help Levy obtain higher military merit. That request revealed a connection between the terrifying Marcus Angelus and the 9th-tier Dawn priest. Nelson even offered Levy a formal path into the Church of Dawn as one of its priests. Levy refused because accepting clergy status would require surrendering the lordship he had fought to build. Stormwind was dangerous and expensive, but it belonged to him, and he would not trade it for institutional safety. Nelson accepted the answer and ordered Levy to guide the church expedition back toward Misty Valley. The group included experts so powerful that Levy and Klein felt more like local guides than meaningful combat support. When they reached the valley, Nelson cleared the magical fog with a casual display of 9th-tier control. 3 hours later, the expedition stood before the hidden passage and finally sensed what lay beyond it. Bishop Cena immediately demanded secrecy because public knowledge of a road to hell could destabilize the frontier. Nelson also noticed the concealment formation Levy had used around the area during his earlier operations. Levy admitted an ancient necromancer had appeared there, but still avoided revealing every detail of his system inheritance. He deliberately mentioned the Shadow Temple because that organization was too dangerous to leave outside the church's calculations. The name changed the expedition's posture, turning an investigation into preparation for a possible front line. Nelson and Cena built an 8th-tier holy light array around the damaged passage to contain further activity. Several strong church experts remained behind, while Levy and Klein were finally allowed to return home. 10 exhausting days after leaving, Levy reached Stormwind with proof that his warning had been taken seriously. He immediately resumed preparing for winter, because one sealed danger did not make the rest of the frontier peaceful. Clay brought materials that allowed Levy to craft his own version of the Bag of the Dead. Using high-tier magical beast hide and necromancer stones, Levy created a far larger death energy storage space. The finished artifact contained more than 300 square meters, enough for a substantial undead reserve. Before he could explore that advantage further, the system delivered a completely different warning. A peak 7th-tier Gale Wolf King would reach Stormwind in only 5 days. The old predator was coming with 2 6th-tier wolves, 4 5th-tier wolves, and a large pack. Levy went straight to Panda because ordinary fortress planning could not solve a 7th-tier magical beast crisis alone. Panda understood the reason for the attack. Immediately, the aging Wolf King wanted the bear's higher-tier flesh. If it devoured Panda's 8th-tier foundation, the wolf might force a final breakthrough before age killed it. Panda had only recovered to 7th-tier strengths, but its original foundation still made it priceless prey. In a clean duel, Panda believed it could kill the Wolf King. Yet the surrounding pack changed everything. Levy treated the coming attack like a resource problem because fear offered no useful battlefield plan. One 7th-tier predator could destroy Stormwind, but 200 wolves also represented cores, hides, meat, and merit. He proposed using North Castle as the kill zone, while Panda kept the Wolf King occupied. Storm cannons, magical crossbows, ballistae, prepared ammunition, and disciplined formations would handle the supporting pack. Panda warned that a single failure could erase the territory Levy had spent years building. Levy answered that refusing the fight would only let the same predator attack when Stormwind was less prepared. Clay rushed to Grey Fortress to exchange accumulated merit for additional heavy magical crossbows. Levy personally asked Klein to contain one of the 6th-tier wolves during the battle. That request put Klein's soldiers and career at risk, especially because some borrowed weapons lacked replacement coverage. Klein agreed anyway, turning their frontier cooperation into something stronger than a convenient professional arrangement. Levy evacuated civilians toward the islands around Storm Bay. Before the Wolfpack could reach populated ground, North Castle became the battlefield, precisely because its walls and weapons could be replaced more easily than families. The empty fortress filled with ammunition, crossbows, catapults, soldiers, and crews trained for one concentrated defense. When Klein arrived, he finally saw how Stormwind had earned impossible amounts of military merit through engineering. The crude-looking storm cannons made sense only after he saw the enormous stones stacked beside their firing positions. By noon the next day, Panda smelled the approaching pack before human scouts found anything on the horizon. The bear returned to full combat size and charged west to meet the Wolf King away from the fortress. Their first collision shook the wilderness, confirming every warning about the enemy's peak 7th-tier strength. Panda deliberately gave ground and pulled the king toward North Castle, without allowing the duel to end quickly. The wolf pack followed its ruler into the prepared range, exactly as Levy had planned. Then every heavy weapon Stormwind had positioned opened fire into the charging formation at once. Massive stones crushed wolves packed too tightly to dodge, while magical crossbows focused on higher-tier targets. Ballista bolts tore lanes through the charge, preventing the pack from using its numerical advantage cleanly. Mia and the White Wolf fighters intercepted dangerous beasts that reached positions the artillery could no longer cover. Klein engaged one 6th-tier wolf, leaving Levy responsible for delaying the other, without losing the main defensive line. For several minutes, North Castle functioned like a machine, designed to convert an overwhelming pack into scattered corpses. The Wolf King noticed the losses and tried, pulling the main duel closer to the fortress. Panda answered by drinking Levy's strongest liquor in the middle of combat, entering its strange drunken fighting state. The king interpreted Panda's staggering movement as exhaustion and pressed forward more aggressively. Instead, every unstable step became a dodge, and every lazy-looking paw punished the wolf's committed attacks. Unable to overpower Panda directly, the king called its surviving 6th-tier wolves back for support. Klein held his target, but Levy could not completely block the wolf assigned to his side. He used earth magic to raise barriers and delay retreat routes, rather than chasing a cleaner duel. Clay redirected ranged fire so lesser wolves could not surround Levy, while his attention stayed on the 6th-tier beast. The defense reduced the pack sharply, but the Wolf King still had enough survivors for one desperate maneuver. It ordered several wolves to sacrifice themselves against Panda, then broke away toward Levy's position. Panda rushed to intercept, exposing itself exactly as the Wolf King intended. A concentrated storm breath struck the bear in midair and slammed its massive body into the ground. The Wolf King followed instantly, tearing open Panda's chest and badly damaging one leg. Then, a wind-coated paw drove through Panda's heart before anyone on the walls could intervene. The next impact threw the bear hundreds of meters toward Levy, while the wounded Wolf King remained standing. For one heartbeat, North Castle went silent because Stormwind's strongest fighter had apparently been killed. Panda still forced itself upright and used a final technique to drop another 6th-tier wolf from the sky. Then the bear told Levy there was only one remaining method that could repair the destroyed heart. A life contract would link them permanently, allowing Panda to borrow Levy's vitality to survive the injury. The cost was brutal. If either contracted partner died later, the other could die with them. Levy hesitated, because the agreement was more permanent than any domination contract he had ever used. Panda angrily pointed out that its longer natural lifespan made the bargain expensive for the bear as well. With the Wolf King still alive, Levy opened his spiritual defenses and accepted the contract. The bond formed instantly and ripped so much vitality from him that his knees struck the ground. Life force poured through the connection while Panda's shattered body began rebuilding what the Wolf King had destroyed. Levy lost consciousness before he could see whether the repaired heart would be enough to finish the battle. When he woke again, warm water surrounded him inside Wendy's laboratory, rather than the ruins of North Castle. A full month had passed, while his body recovered from the life force, drained through Panda's contract. Wendy had remained near him through the recovery, and nearly broke down when he finally moved. The reunion immediately turned awkward, because neither of them had prepared for Levy, waking inside the treatment pool. Wendy escaped the room, while Panda's irritated voice appeared directly in Levy's mind through their new bond. The bear had survived, and the Gale Wolf King had not. After Levy collapsed, Panda recovered enough vitality to continue fighting the exhausted predator. The king assumed Panda's repaired heart was only a temporary burst and failed to retreat while escape remained possible. Panda eventually climbed onto the Wolf King's back and beat the peak, 7th-tier predator to death. The bear also finished the remaining 6th-tier wolf before collapsing beside Levy. One enemy that had nearly erased Stormwind now filled its storage rooms as meat, hide, cores, and research material. Panda then revealed the truth about its species and why their shared life contract behaved so strangely. It was not an ordinary Earth Bear variant, but a member of the Panda clan from another plane. That clan had entered Noah long ago during an ancient interdimensional war and possessed partnership contracts unknown to humans. The bond allowed both partners to share vitality, lifespan, and limited benefits from each other's comprehension. Comparable pandas naturally lived around 4 times longer than humans, meaning Levy had accidentally extended his own lifespan. Higher cultivation could stretch that shared future even farther, turning a desperate battlefield choice into a priceless advantage. The victory still carried a cost. The system could not convert into an upgrade. Stormwind had lost 343 soldiers, while 56 survivors were left permanently disabled. 8 professionals were among the dead, each representing training and families the territory could not replace quickly. Most stormballistae and heavy magical crossbows around North Castle had also been destroyed during the final assault. Levy ordered pensions, honored because those losses belonged to households that had trusted his promises before the battle. More than 200 magical beast corpses now filled Stormwind's workshops, creating resources for the rebuilding effort. Levy announced a future professional academy for children of officers and trained professionals who had served the territory. That promise gave veteran families access to education normally monopolized by nobles and wealthy organizations. While North Castle was repaired, Levy returned to cultivation and finally pushed his magic into the 4th-tier Archmage realm. His chaos meditation now carried earth, water, fire, wind, light, and darkness in one increasingly complex foundation. New wind and fire spells joined the arsenal. While literacy classes opened across the territory during winter, Levy refused to build a professional academy for children who could not first read the techniques stored inside it. Before the Gale Wolf battle, Levy also moved civilians, food, and non-combat workers away from every route the pack might cross. North Castle crews measured ammunition carefully because firing too early would leave the walls helpless against higher-tier wolves. Klein's borrowed heavy weapons represented political risk as well as military power if they were destroyed under Levy's command. Panda's duel worked only because the bear kept the Wolf King angry enough to follow rather than retreat into the mountains. Stormwind's artillery crews targeted density, using narrow approach routes to make the pack's numbers work against itself. Mia's formation prevented surviving magical beasts from turning the wall into a chaotic melee where artillery became useless. Levy's earth barriers were not meant to defeat a 6th-tier wolf. They bought seconds for stronger attacks to arrive. The Wolf King understood the fortress was killing its pack and changed tactics before total annihilation, made victory meaningless. Its sacrificial order proved the old predator was willing to spend every subordinate if Panda's flesh still offered advancement. Panda's destroyed heart made ordinary healing impossible, which is why the life contract became more than a desperate suggestion. Levy accepted knowing the contract could make Panda's future death his own problem centuries later. During his month unconscious, Stormwind had to finish the battle, bury its dead, and begin repairs without its lord directing anything. Panda's victory over the exhausted king came only after the contract restored enough vitality for 1-6 sustained fight. The shared bond also allowed mental communication, explaining why Panda's voice could reach Levy immediately after he woke. Levy's new lifespan was not a fixed reward. It depended on both partners surviving and continuing their cultivation. Professional families received pensions under existing promises, rather than forcing widows to beg after every major battle. Magical beast meat from the slain pack was distributed strategically because it could strengthen soldiers and trainees. Hides and cores went toward armor, trade, and replacement weapons instead of being treated as trophies. The planned academy was partly compensation to families whose adults had carried Stormwind through repeated impossible defenses. Literacy classes began first, because technique manuals were useless to talented children who could not read them. Then a message from his hidden Shadow Temple contact ended the brief period of recovery. The Shadow Temple had located Misty Valley and ordered its own main force toward the sealed Hell Passage. CV sent an emergency warning through Grey Fortress and the nearest Church of Dawn contacts before the enemy arrived. Inside Misty Valley, church defenders were already struggling to maintain the 8th-tier Holy Light Array. The first Shadow Temple assault included 7th and 8th-tier experts, supported by dark mages and some forces. Neither side could break the other immediately, turning the battle into a race to gather stronger reinforcements. The Dawn Church informed the royal family, while Paladin Redmond joined the first emergency response, heading north. Meanwhile, politics in the capital became nearly as dangerous as the fighting around the passage. Earl Pierce questioned whether Angelus could provide the strength expected from someone carrying the Marcus name. He assumed Tulip family divisions had weakened her position enough to make public pressure useful. Angelus answered by proposing a formal noble duel, rather than letting Pierce turn suspicion into reputation damage. At only 23, her real strength was far beyond what most of the people challenging her expected. She also chose to join the Misty Valley operation personally, because Nelson would command the decisive assault. By the time Levy reached the valley again, Shadow Temple reinforcements had already escalated the conflict. Among them was Gustav, a Saint Realm terror crocodile powerful enough to change the entire battlefield by himself. Levy asked whether he could simply avoid the operation, knowing Panda's life was now tied directly to his own. The answer was effectively no. If the passage became permanent, Stormwind would eventually face hell at its doorstep. Nelson gave Panda a spatial rune intended for use once the bear reached the 9th tier. That escape tool mattered because the expedition might be forced somewhere ordinary teleportation could not reach. When the combined forces arrived, Saint Realm combat was already shaking the ground around Misty Valley. The Shadow Temple had constructed a Necromancer array designed to erode the church's holy light formation. More than 20 lower-tier mages maintained the outer structure, while stronger fighters contested the center. Levy joined those supporting mages, instead of pretending his current rank made him useful in Saint Realm's exchanges. Then his danger sense caught powerful malice, coming from an 8th-tier Sky Warrior standing too close. He warned Panda immediately and memorized the man's face before making any obvious defensive move. The warning came just in time because a 7th-tier magical net suddenly expanded over Levy and Panda. The formation sealed their power before Panda could return to full size and smash through the attackers. Angelus escaped the first trap through teleportation, proving she had anticipated at least some chance of betrayal. When she counterattacked with Gathering Sun, the traitorous Sky Warrior pulled Levy into the line of fire as a shield. He then dragged both Levy and Panda toward the damaged Hell Passage, while the battlefield collapsed around them. The passage swallowed them before the church forces could break the trap or pull Levy back. Angelus followed into Hell, rather than letting the closing path strand Levy and Panda alone. Outside Vrings nearly attacked church leadership. After learning, Angelus had disappeared beyond the sealed passage. 3 days later, the remaining Saint Realm experts returned from pursuit without killing every Shadow Temple leader. Inside Hell, Levy and Panda faced a different problem. They had no reliable route home yet. The spatial rune Nelson gave Panda would remain useless until the bear actually completed its 9th tier breakthrough. They moved through hostile territory searching for somewhere Panda could advance without attracting every demon nearby. Eventually, the pair reached a mist-covered swamp located on the 6th level of Hell. Levy followed signs of battle because one 7th tier fire mage he knew should have been somewhere in that region. 10 days of searching brought them close enough to hear a violent fight spreading across the swamp. Angelus was still alive, but several demons and undead had surrounded her. After days of pursuit, 2 8th tier enemies and multiple 7th tier fighters kept her from escaping cleanly. Panda charged first and smashed a 7th tier wraith before the attackers understood a new force had entered. Sevi supported from range while Angelus used the opening to kill another pursuer and regain movement. The three of them broke the encirclement, although Salin escaped after recognizing Levy and surviving the clash. That left another dangerous enemy, who now knew Levy's face and understood part of his hidden involvement. Angelus finally reached a safer area and nearly collapsed from accumulated injuries and exhaustion. While she recovered, Levy used Hell's dense death energy to study the dark inheritance he had stolen earlier. In barely 10 days, he mastered a 4th circle dark spell, faster than normal mages would consider realistic. Angelus noticed the speed, but Livesies avoided explaining how much borrowed Necromancer experience supported his learning. She did teach him how a talent spell could form from a fully mastered magical structure. Levy applied that principle to death magic, while the system handled the impossible parts inside his spiritual sea. Eventually, a new talent spell appeared on the panel under the name Hell Apostle. Its rule was simple and horrifying. Enemies Levy personally killed could return as undead 1 tier weaker. Levy upgraded the ability immediately until it matched the limits of his current magical realm. Hell had become both a prison and an enormous supply of compatible death energy for his new path. Angelus warned him that uncontrolled dark magic would attract the Church of Dawn, even if his intentions were practical. Levy agreed to report dangerous developments while keeping system details outside anyone else's reach. Once Angelus could travel again, the group focused on the only realistic escape route available. Panda still needed to reach the 9th tier before Nelson's spatial rune could activate safely. They gathered resources that could shorten the bear's remaining cultivation, instead of simply waiting inside enemy territory. Levy also acquired potion formulas for 3rd tier and 4th tier mage advancement during their time in Hell. Those recipes had little immediate value there, but Stormwind's growing academy would eventually need exactly that knowledge. 3 months into Panda's breakthrough attempt, Saint Realm pressure finally began rising from the bear's position. The disturbance also drew hostile attention, including enemies connected to the Shadow Temple pursuit. Levy and Angelus intercepted one of those threats before it could interrupt Panda at the worst possible moment. An old enemy from the Misty Valley conflict finally died in the Pale Swamp before escaping again. Once Panda stabilized at the 9th tier, the pressure around him changed from powerful beast to genuine Saint Realm monster. Nelson's spatial rune finally responded, giving the 3 stranded allies the route they had been waiting for. They activated it before Hell could gather another force strong enough to trap the newly advanced Panda. Panda emerged first on Noah, carrying 9th tier pressure that immediately announced how much he had changed. Levy and Angelus followed after months beneath dead skies and constant demonic threat. The return answered why Nelson had prepared a 9th tier escape rune before the expedition ever collapsed. Levy decided questioning a priest famous for foresight could wait because the frontier was already fighting another war. He asked for Stormwind's battlefield reports before accepting food, celebration, or even proper rest. The answer was worse than he expected. Orc forces had invaded while he was trapped in Hell. Nelson had ordered exposed positions abandoned, rather than letting Stormwind die defending buildings it could rebuild. North Castle was one of those sacrifices, forcing workers, ships, and civilians to withdraw towards safer islands. Levy hated losing workshops and years of construction, but preserving engineers mattered more than preserving walls. Klein had also sent a 6th tier magical giant crossbow as part of Levy's earlier Misty Valley reward. The weapon came with 15 6th tier explosive bolts and enough supporting equipment to change 1 critical engagement. Levy suspected the reward reflected political calculations beyond simple paperwork, but he accepted resources Stormwind badly needed. During the second Misty Valley operation, Levy remained deliberately below the strongest combat layer instead of chasing prestige. The church needed the support formation stable, and one unnecessary hero could collapse protection for everyone inside it. The 8th tier trader's hostile intent reached Levy before the attack because his system-enhanced danger perception had improved. After the betrayal, suspicion fell naturally toward Dalton connections, because the attacking Sky Warrior belonged to that political network. None of those accusations helped Levy once hell closed behind him, so he prioritized survival over distant revenge. He learned that hell was divided into 9 layers, with deeper regions generally controlled by stronger rulers. The 6th laser was already dangerous enough that attracting a large undead swarm could trap even Panda before breakthrough. Levy and Panda moved frequently, instead of building one obvious camp that local demons could surround. Finding Angelus confirmed she had survived the passage, but had been fighting continuously since separation. Her rescue also changed Levy's relationship with her, because she had entered hell voluntarily instead of abandoning him. While recovering, Angelus shared practical magical theory that noble families normally guarded through formal instruction. Levy's system accelerated comprehension, but he still needed correct spell structures before the panel could improve anything useful. Hell Apostle emerged from that combination of inherited necromancy, Angelus's theory, and the environment's death energy. Levy learned the spell's 1-tier reduction prevented him from simply reviving enemies at their original battlefield strength. That limitation still made high-tier kills disproportionately valuable, because even weakened professionals remained dangerous servants. Potion recipes collected in Hell later became Academy assets, linking one survival crisis directly to Stormwind's institutional growth. Panda's breakthrough created enough disturbance that remaining enemies had one final chance to interrupt the escape plan. Levy and Angelus protected the breakthrough, because losing Panda then would also destroy their only prepared route home. The spatial rune activated only after Panda stabilized at 9th tier, exactly matching Nelson's earlier condition. Returning to Noah with Panda transformed Stormwind's deterrence even before the bear fought another enemy. 5 large orc battalions were now positioned to threaten Stormwind directly. 3 6th-tier leaders commanded mixed crocodile men, sphinxes, wolf-headed cavalry, pig-headed troops, and supporting forces. Eaglemen provided aerial harassment by dropping stones and using captured magical crossbows from above. Levy walked through the castle before the next attack, so civilians and soldiers could see their lord had actually returned. That visible return lifted morale faster than any written order, because Stormwind had spent months assuming he might be dead. Angelus remained temporarily, because her 7th-tier strength did not create the same strategic problem as Panda's new realm. Nelson soon left for other fronts, leaving Levy to solve the army, already approaching his own walls. Levy inspected every prepared position and adjusted defenses using what Stormwind had learned from the wolf battle. He could now read combat intent earlier through his improved talents, making ambushes and feints harder to hide. That night, he activated part of the Four Kings formation around Stormwind's most valuable heavy weapons. The formation protected storm cannons, ballistae, and magical crossbows from the opening wave of enemy destruction. 5 pig-headed squadrons advanced first, clearly intended to burn ammunition for stronger orc units committed. Levy refused to fire every weapon at expendable targets and waited until the formation of the real assault became visible. Malt, a 6th-tier wolf-headed commander, held additional reserves behind the first pressure wave. When the orcs finally pushed into the prepared kill zone, Levy gave the first coordinated firing order. Storm cannons and magical crossbows broke dense formations, while protected crews reloaded behind the Four Kings barrier. Malt hurled a spear from roughly 100 meters away, trying to kill Levy before Stormwind's weapons could decide the battle. Levy reacted before fully facing him, catching the attack pattern through the perception talent stacked inside his system. He answered by killing the 3rd-tier dire wolf beneath Malt with a precisely placed piercing arrow. That single shot stripped the commander of mobility and created the opening Levy had been waiting to exploit. Then, Levy released Hell Apostle publicly, for the first time on Stormwind's battlefield. Dead enemies began rising as undead warriors, turning the orcs' own casualties into pressure against their surviving formations. Every personal kill Levy secured could now create another servant 1 tier weaker than the original fighter. The rule made high-tier enemy officers more valuable dead than ordinary soldiers because their undead versions retained useful strength. Malt fell during the collapse, removing one of the strongest commanders holding the assault together. The surviving 6th-tier Sphinx recognized the pattern and ordered retreat before Stormwind exhausted its ammunition. Wolf-headed cavalry that should have protected the withdrawal panicked when undead began appearing behind their retreating lines. Levy did not stay on the walls. He pushed west with the summoned force and hunted professional targets during the withdrawal. Each successful kill created military merit, battlefield resources, or another undead servant capable of joining the pursuit. Roughly 2 kilometers from Stormwind, the surviving orcs finally reformed enough to stop the chase from becoming slaughter. Levy ended the pursuit rather than overextending into territory where enemy reinforcements could surround him. Stormwind had won the immediate battle, but the casualty reports prevented anyone serious from treating it like a clean victory. Families would receive pension payments for years because survival had once again been purchased with trained soldiers' lives. Instead of waiting behind the walls, Levy used Panda's mobility to study what the wider orc occupation looked like. He discovered strong enemy commanders spread across several positions, while human refugees were trapped between controlled routes. One cluster included an 8th-tier Sky Knight and a 7th-tier mage among the visible defenders. The orcs were using those forces to prevent survivors and defeated nobles from reaching Grey Fortress. Levy began attacking scattered detachments where Hell Apostle gave him an advantage ordinary raiders could never reproduce. Each dead orc could become a soldier before the next camp understood why the previous patrol had disappeared. Grain, weapons, captives, and refugees accumulated as Levy converted occupation territory into supplies for the northern defense. His undead force eventually reached roughly 3,000 servants, revealing the practical ceiling of Hell Apostle. At his current level, Levy hid rescued civilians and grain inside the Grey Mountains rather than dragging vulnerable groups through active battle zones. Among recovered items was a 5th-tier Mad Lion breathing technique from a family nearly destroyed during the invasion. A matching sword skill and several thousand gold coins turned another abandoned estate into resources Stormwind could actually use. Levy contracted surviving professionals who wanted protection and ordered Jerham to guard the rescued population. Rumors soon spread among the orcs about a hidden dark mage destroying their rear area camps. The enemy responded by gathering scattered units instead of allowing Levy to defeat them one group at a time. That reduced his easy targets but also relieved pressure on refugees who had been trapped by isolated detachments. Levy chose one consolidated force south of Grey Fortress and attacked before it could grow larger. 3,000 undead moved against roughly half a legion before dawn, while Panda remained available as emergency support. Levy personally killed the 7th-tier commander with a brutal close-range strike once the formation finally broke. He then eliminated a 6th-tier jackal fighter and another 6th-tier leopard-headed professional during the collapse. The battle confirmed Hell Apostle could not maintain more than about 3,000 undead servants simultaneously. That limit mattered because Levy could not solve every future army simply by stacking corpses without restraint. When defenders at Grey Fortress saw the Dark Army approaching, several raised weapons against Levy instead of welcoming him. He dismissed the undead back into hell and explained that Nelson already knew he practiced controlled dark magic. Klein accepted the explanation because years of frontier cooperation mattered more than the frightening appearance of the spell. Grey Fortress still had several 7th-tier commanders, and Martin's, a 7th-tier archmage, supporting its battered defense. Viscount Leon formally thanked Levy for the raids that rescued civilians and returned supplies toward human control. That campaign turned a neighboring noble into a more reliable ally, because Levy had acted when the region was collapsing. Energy essence from the fighting let Levy finish silver-grade improvements across his existing innate talents. Then intelligence arrived, revealing a more dangerous threat inside Grey Fortress than the orc armies outside. The Divine Eye Society had infiltrated the fortress with a 7th-tier archmage leading 6 supporting mages. Their plan was to attack the Legion Mage Squad during the next orc assault and destroy key defensive systems. They also intended to break the formation core and military communication array, where internal chaos began. That method matched earlier mysterious fortress collapses where outside pressure had seemed to succeed far too quickly. Levy went to Klein that evening and asked exactly how those earlier strongholds had fallen. The answer gave him enough confidence to move against the infiltrators before their scheduled betrayal. He approached the 7th-tier mage under an ordinary pretext and waited until the target noticed something was wrong. Levy's first strike failed to kill cleanly because 7th-tier mages possessed an automatic defensive magical field. The wounded infiltrator fled toward the western wall, trying to contact allies before Levy could finish the ambush. He managed only part of a Saint Realm warning before Panda ended the escape with one massive paw. Elsewhere inside the fortress, Levy teleported behind a 5th-tier infiltrator and subdued him instead of killing him. A domination contract turned that mage into another source of intelligence before military investigators arrived. Levy sent the enslaved infiltrator away through the western wall so nobody could connect him publicly with Stormwind. Then he searched every captured storage for information and resources the hidden society had accumulated. One ring could restore mana, proving the organization equipped agents for long operations rather than simple sabotage. News also arrived that Redmond had defeated the 9th-tier dragon-blooded Cobalt Daniel near Frost Moon City. With major orc forces pulling back and the royal army too damaged to pursue recklessly, the northern campaign began stabilizing. Levy hurried towards Stormwind before the kingdom could fully investigate why Grey Fortress suffered its internal betrayal. Klein agreed to protect the rescued grain and civilians hidden inside the mountains until safer transport routes reopened. On the road, Levy confirmed forces near the Canaan River were retreating as well. That retreat created a short opportunity to punish enemies who had assumed Stormwind would remain too busy to respond. Levy tracked down one captured Divine Eye mage and extracted the information needed for another operation. Among the withdrawing commanders was Lamasi, the 6th-tier dire crocodile who had previously attacked Stormwind. Levy arranged an ambush and killed Lamasi before the remaining unit could reorganize around him. With the external invasion weakening, he turned toward a local noble who had tried profiting from Stormwind's vulnerability. Baron Otto had seized property while assuming a remote frontier lord could not retaliate during wartime. Levy's assembled storm cannons and marched directly toward Otto's castle instead of sending another complaint. Viscount Leon moved nearby to observe, because a territorial dispute between nobles could easily escalate into open war. A 7th-tier Dawn priest also attended, partly because Levy's necromancy now made every confrontation politically sensitive. Otto trusted his walls until Stormwind's first giant stones crossed the distance his defenders considered safe. The castle was hit by accurate artillery before Levy's troops even needed to begin a conventional siege. Otto surrendered quickly, rather than discovering how many more shots the supposedly crude machines could throw. Clay stared at the result, because Stormwind had barely started fighting when the noble position collapsed. An ordinary-looking mechanical weapon had launched enormous stones, roughly 300 meters, with useful battlefield accuracy. The dispute ended through compensation instead of extermination, giving Levy leverage without creating a pointless noble blood feud. More importantly, observers now understood the storm cannon design itself could reshape fortress warfare. Levy realized selling the technology individually to nobles would let powerful buyers coordinate and crush his price. A royal purchase offered something more valuable than money alone: political protection around Stormwind's growing military industry. During the Orc siege, Levy refused to waste 6th-tier explosive bolts on targets ordinary artillery could already destroy. The Four Kings formation mattered because enemy air units specifically targeted Stormwind expensive siege weapons first. Eagleman tried to break crews from above, forcing archers and magical defenses to protect reload cycles. Malt's failed spear attack showed enemy commanders had correctly identified Levy as the center of Stormwind's coordination. Levy's early kill on Malt's mount reduced that commander's ability to move between collapsing sections of the line. Hell Apostle frightened human soldiers too, so Levy kept undead movement away from friendly formations whenever possible. The retreating Sphinx understood continued fighting would only give Levy more corpses to convert into pursuit forces. Levy stopped after 2 kilometers because undead support did not erase the danger of walking into prepared orc reserves. Rear area raids targeted food depots and isolated professionals before they targeted ordinary occupied villages. That strategy weakened the invasion while reducing the number of civilians caught between 2 attacking armies. Refugees hidden in the Grey Mountains received captured grain, so rescue did not simply move starvations somewhere safer. Levy's 3,000-servant ceiling forced him to dismiss weaker undead when stronger new corpses became available. At Grey Fortress, fear of necromancy nearly created friendly fire before Levy demonstrated control by dismissing the entire army. Klein's trust carried political weight because other commanders knew he had fought beside Levy during earlier frontier crises. Viscount Leon's gratitude also gave Stormwind access to cooperation beyond its own borders, instead of another isolated ally. The Divine Eye infiltrations explained why several earlier fortresses had collapsed faster than their outside attackers should have managed. Levy treated internal sabotage as strategically equal to a siege engine because formations could fail from one hidden mage. The 7th-tier infiltrator's defensive field prevented a clean assassination and forced Levy to improvise during the escape. Panda ended the warning before the mage could contact a Saint Realm supporter, waiting somewhere beyond the fortress. The dominated 5th-tier infiltrator became a reusable intelligence source rather than another corpse with unanswered questions. Captured storage rings helped reveal how much money and preparation the secret organization invested in long-term cells. Redmond's victory over Cobalt Daniel reduced pressure elsewhere, giving Grey Fortress room to stabilize without a reckless pursuit. Lamasi's later death closed a personal threat Stormwind had already faced during the invasion. Otto's surrendered stores included food that helped offset harvest losses caused by wartime evacuation. The artillery demonstration at Otto's castle became accidental marketing before Levy ever negotiated with the royal family. The royal delegation arrived soon afterward, with Redmond himself examining the weapons Stormwind had used against the orcs. His presence made every soldier straighten, because a 9th-tier royal expert rarely traveled personally to a young frontier territory. Redmond also recognized Panda's 9th-tier advancement and connected it with Nelson's emergency spatial rune. Levy demonstrated the storm cannon before discussing price, making the weapon's strategic value impossible to dismiss as frontier boasting. He asked for several 4th-tier magical artifacts across useful elements instead of demanding only gold. Stormwind could produce mechanical designs, but it could not easily manufacture every high-tier magical component those designs required. The royal family rejected part of the requested package because its wartime reserves had already been drained. Levies adjusted the terms rather than losing the deal, trading some immediate resources for stronger royal involvement. Redmond and Levy eventually signed a sealed agreement covering the cannon technology and supporting military knowledge. Levy then took the Paladin north to the construction base inside North Castle. Redmond studied the fortress itself before reaching the workshop because its layout reflected the same practical thinkings as the artillery. Levy admitted he had designed much of the structure around repeated defense, repair, and concentrated production. Inside the workshop, a newly assembled cannon was calibrated using Stormwind's accumulated firing data. The test proved the design could be reproduced without relying on one irreplaceable craftsman or magical secret. Redmond left with a very different opinion of the Frontier Lord, who had once seemed politically insignificant. The delegation returned for a banquet, where Stormwind presented another product with long-term value: concentrated liquor. Storm spirits hit far harder than ordinary frontier wine, creating immediate commercial interest among visitors. Levy saw the difference between wartime merit and peaceful income more clearly than ever. A territory that needed invasions to earn wealth would eventually be destroyed by the same wars feeding it. Liquor, sugar, and technology offered revenue streams that could continue even when armies stopped moving. Otto's compensation arrived around the same time, giving Stormwind money to repair damage without delaying every expansion plan. North Castle remained scarred but usable, so Levy resumed the larger three-castle defensive concept instead of abandoning it. The Orc War had exposed where Stormwind lacked crossbows, formations, horses, officers, and replacement production. Levy used those failures as design requirements for the next rebuilding cycle, rather than treating them as embarrassment. Royal interest also meant future enemies might try stealing the cannon plans instead of paying for them. He tightened information control around workshops and compartmentalized knowledge, so one captured craftsman could not reproduce everything. At the same time, he continued using hidden contacts inside the Shadow Temple and Divine Eye network. Niz remained useful, precisely because nobody there knew the captured mage had become Levy's unwilling informant. Stormwind's survival increasingly depended on intelligence that never appeared during parades or noble ceremonies. After the immediate crisis faded, Levy turned wartime resources into promotions for people who had actually carried the territory. More than 30 elite soldiers had reached their physical limits after repeated campaigns. 8 apprentice knights were also ready for professional breakthroughs if Stormwind could supply the correct materials. Pocker prepared the promotion lists, while Levy matched rewards to service instead of family background. Clay received the resources needed to continue toward the 3rd tier, rather than remaining dependent on tulip patronage. 5 young fiery steeds matured into 1st-tier magical beasts under Wendy's care. The royal family also sent 50 Windchaser horses, each already a first-tier magical beast suitable for professional cavalry. Levy reorganized mounted units around those animals, while still buying ordinary horses for scouts and logistics. The previous orc withdrawal had proven that elite cavalry meant little if ordinary troops could not move supplies quickly. Meanwhile, more than 10,000 new people arrived, while winter tightened around Storm Cape. Levy spent 2 weeks riding across the peninsula with Jenkins, selecting sites for villages, roads, and defensive support points. Population growth created manpower, but it also created food demand, housing shortages, and larger areas exposed to raids. He refused to treat settlement numbers as victory until the new communities could actually survive the next winter. During this period, Levy also wanted a stronger defensive talent before another assassin reached striking distance. That plan was interrupted when Wendy reported an injured Thunder Falcon operating near Stormwind. Panda refused to become Levy's personal hunting mount and reminded him that 9th-tier sacred beasts had dignity. Levy accepted the rejection, mostly because arguing with Panda usually became more expensive than solving the problem alone. He tracked the Falcon himself, restrained it, and used a temporary domination contract to prevent a desperate escape. After treating the poison affecting the creature, Levy learned where its nest and family were located. Wendy immediately saw the possibility of taming, rather than simply harvesting another wounded magical beast. What looked like a random predator problem became a potential flying beast breeding resource for Stormwind. Then Royal Griffin riders arrived, carrying part of Edward II's promised payment and a new political offer. The remaining heavy magical crossbows and Windchaser horses would follow once transport routes became secure enough. Marcus Vito explained that the kingdom needed visible successes after recent defeats damaged morale across the north. Levy's battlefield record and cannon contribution qualified him for promotion beyond his original frontier title. The crown offered land eastward under a condition: build a functioning frontline fortress there within 10 years. If he succeeded, the expanded territory would formally become Levy's Viscounty. The offer gave him more land, but it also turned future construction into a binding royal obligation. Before traveling for investiture, Levy completed additional earth spell studies and integrated them into his magical system. New patterns inside his spiritual sea produced another talent spell after the elemental structure stabilized. Levy now traveled with layered magic, night power, multiple innate talents, and a 9th-tier panda beside him. The contrast with the penniless exile, who once feared roadside bandits, was impossible to ignore. Panda also revealed a spatial realm, large enough to transport supplies beyond the limits of ordinary storage rings. That ability made the bear strategically useful, even when direct combat would be politically inappropriate. When Levy reached the royal city, mage towers and dawn church structures announced the concentration of high-tier power. One arrogant professional treated Panda like an ordinary magical beast and nearly created a diplomatic disaster in public. Several tier auras appeared immediately when Panda responded, forcing royal representatives to calm the situation. The incident reminded Levy that power solved problems only when everyone understood which power was standing nearby. Political families approached him during the visit, each trying to attach Stormwind's growing value to their own interests. Some wanted Angelus to pressure Levy on their behalf, assuming old connections could replace negotiation. Levy avoided those elegant traps because accepting favors in the capital usually created obligations far from Stormwind. On the first day of the new dawn year, the investiture ceremony formally elevated his status. The title gave Stormwind more authority but also made its obligations to the crown larger and more visible. Levy returned with materials, agreements, and enough new responsibility to justify strengthening administration immediately. He wanted Anthony trained in territory management because Stormwind needed capable administrators almost as badly as combat professionals. New settlers initially appeared as mouths to feed, yet skill surveys gradually revealed craftsmen, veterans, and useful specialists. Levy organized those people instead of letting valuable talent disappear into ordinary farm assignments. Once the territory stabilized, he locked himself away with shark heart potions and pushed his night cultivation again. The barrier finally broke, carrying Levy into the 5th tier as a silver knight. The new realm increased his recovery dramatically, allowing prolonged fighting without the same physical collapse as before. One system effect pushed that recovery roughly 5 times beyond ordinary expectations. Another combat effect, bloodlust, made severe injury less useful as a method for weakening him quickly. Levy tested the ability carefully, rather than discovering its limits for the first time during an assassination attempt. Clay had reached the 3rd tier, while Wendy had become a 4th-tier archmage through her own progress. Garcia of the White Wolf people also advanced into the 3rd tier, strengthening the professional depth of Stormwind's army. The territory was finally moving away from dependence on 4 or 5 irreplaceable fighters. Levy expanded iron armor production, so ordinary soldiers benefited from Stormwind's wealth instead of only elite units. The 50 Royal Windchaser horses completed the core of the cavalry force he had wanted since the Orc War. Yet, every new design still crashed into the same limit. Materials could not be invented by clever planning. That bottleneck made mines, trade routes, magical beast resources, and skilled craftsmen strategically important. Levy wanted magical artifacts in the cannon deal because gold could not instantly replace rare elemental components. Royal protection also reduced the chance that one noble family would simply declare Stormwind's workshops illegal and seize them. Redmond inspected manufacturing steps to determine whether the weapon could be reproduced across several royal fortresses. Stormwind's strength came from repeated calibration, standardized crews, and simple mechanisms, rather than one mystical secret. That simplicity irritated royal experts who had possessed catapults for generations without optimizing them the same way. Levy avoided insulting those experts because selling an invention mattered more than winning an argument about engineering. At the banquet, he watched how quickly concentrated liquor created demand among people who already had access to luxury goods. Sugar offered another peaceful product, giving Stormwind income even if the crown eventually parts of the cannon system. Levy's old commercial instincts favored several smaller markets over dependence on one military customer. Royal payment was scheduled over months, so he continued investing before every promised resource physically arrived. Battle merit funded advancement items for soldiers whose progress had stalled at known professional bottlenecks. Clay's promotion mattered politically because his loyalty had shifted gradually from tulips towards Stormwind service. Windchaser horses were organized around riders who could actually maintain formation rather than simply handed to high-status officers. Ordinary horses remained essential because magical mounts were too expensive for messengers, wagons, and sowshies. Jenkins mapped new settlements around water, roads, and defensive response time, instead of spacing villages evenly. Winter construction focused on survival infrastructure, while larger expansion plans waited for workable weather. The Thunderfalcon's poison explained why an apparently strong flying beast had fallen close enough for capture. Wendy's interest in the nest pushed Levy toward breeding and taming rather than one-time harvesting. Royal Griffin riders demonstrated the strategic value of reliable aerial transport more clearly than any written report. Marcus Vito framed the Viscounty offer as reward, but Levy recognized the 10-year fortress deadline as an obligation. Accepting meant Stormwind would defend more land in exchange for more formal authority and future tax base. Panda's spatial realm made moving construction materials possible on routes where ordinary wagons would attract too much attention. In the capital, Levy avoided promising exclusive cannon access to private families before the crown finalized its own agreements. Every political conversation reminded him that being useful made Stormwind harder to ignore, but easier to manipulate. The investiture ended his status as a disposable minor baron without making him strong enough to ignore royal politics. Storm Professional Academy finally opened once. Literacy training and facilities reached a usable level. Children between 10 and 14 from officer, administrator, and professional families formed the first organized class. The academy gave loyal families a future inside Stormwind instead of force-helmeted children towards outside noble patrons. It also created a pipeline for mages and knights who would understand the territory's methods from childhood. Levy continued both knight and mage cultivation, making his official classification increasingly useless to outside observers. Then, 2 9th-tier magical beasts created a completely different problem near the frontier. The lava dragon with old hostility toward Panda moved through the region, and Levy immediately warned the bear against reckless fighting. Panda ignored enough of that advice that Levy followed, unwilling to let 2 Saint Realm beasts reshape local geography unsupervised. Levy stayed hidden during their confrontation, because joining a 9th-tier beast feud directly would have been suicidal. While Panda and the lava dragon focused on each other, Levy noticed the dragon's territory had become unusually exposed. He used a controlled undead servant to investigate, instead of leaving a human trail pointing toward Stormwind. The servant recovered valuable fire copper and a storage ring, then moved away through a route designed to break pursuit. Levy refused to let the undead walk straight home, because a ninth-tier dragon could follow magical evidence better than ordinary soldiers. A second servant collected the treasure later, separating the theft from Stormwind through multiple layers of misdirection. When the lava dragon investigated, signs pointed toward rebellious magical beasts rather than one greedy Viscount. The recovered storage space was enormous, was large enough to move siege equipment and major supplies without wagon columns. Inside the loot were a 6th-tier demon scale robe and a 6th-tier wind calamity staff. Levy also recovered another volume, connected to Frodo's 13 formations, expanding his understanding of ancient arrays. Near the end of the records, one unexplored location drew his attention more than the immediate equipment. The Lich Prison Tower supposedly stood deep inside the savage ancient forest of the Central Mountains. Notes suggested an ancient Lich had once been confined there, but previous explorers had never completed the investigation. Levy stored the information instead of rushing into another death trap, simply because treasure probably existed inside. When Panda finally returned, the most useful parts of the discovery were already hidden inside Stormwind's private archive. Routine development resumed until another kingdom-level crisis reached Grey Fortress through Klein. A rebellion linked with the Wilderness Brotherhood was spreading, and royal orders demanded immediate reinforcement. Losing Grey Fortress would place hostile forces directly across Stormwind's southern approaches. Levy marched because allowing the fortress to fall would cost far more than temporarily exposing his own territory. He kept Wendy near Stormwind when possible, because her healing, magic, and administrative value made her difficult to replace. Helapostle still capped his active undead force at roughly 3,000, forcing him to choose targets carefully. At Grey Fortress, Levy sent undead forward first to absorb attention while human troops prepared behind stronger positions. A 6th-tier gold warrior charged into range, assuming Levy's visible rank still represented his actual danger. Levy answered with 9 Suns Burst and dropped the professional before the Sid troops understood the source. That kill forced the 7th-tier rebel leader behind the formation to enter the battle personally. Osmer had prepared thousands of berserk potions, hoping sheer numbers could overwhelm summoned undead and exhaust the fortress. Levy burned through magic while his servants tied down professionals who would otherwise massacre ordinary soldiers. The 7th-tier fanatic discovered that Levy could switch between too many attack types to counter with one specialty. Levy caught him before open ground allowed the stronger fighter to reset the battle on favorable terms. Stormwind's mounted squadron also hit retreating cultists and killed nearly 400, with only around 60 riders. Levy ordered pursuit because letting organized fanatics escape would simply create another rebellion later. The first academy intake contained only 19 students, small enough for Levy to know every name and background. Once formal breathing techniques or meditation began, each student owed 20 years of service to Stormwind. That contract protected the territory from funding expensive training, only to watch graduates leave immediately for richer nobles. Levy's chaos meditation also reached the 5th tier during this broader period of institutional growth. His first post-breakthrough visits were the academy and elementary school rather than another battlefield. Younger children studied letters while older candidates learned the discipline required before professional cultivation. The schools gave ordinary families a visible reason to believe Stormwind's growth could benefit their children directly. Levy's 5th-tier mage progress also narrowed the gap between his magical and night paths. When the lava dragon appeared, Panda's old hostility with it made negotiation harder before treasure even entered the discussion. Levy followed partly because Saint Realm creatures could destroy nearby settlements accidentally while settling personal grudges. The stolen storage ring held around 1,000 cubic meters, enough to hide weapons, supplies, and industrial cargo. That capacity changed logistics as much as combat, because entire wagon trains could disappear into one portable space. Frodo's formation records were more valuable than a single staff, because they could be studied repeatedly by future mages. Levy archived the Lich Prison Tower location until Stormwind possessed enough strength to investigate without gambling everything. His restraint came from experience. Misty Valley had already proven ancient ruins, often included threats far above visible treasure. When rebellion orders arrived, Levy calculated Grey Fortress as part of Stormwind's own defensive depth rather than someone else's problem. Keeping Wendy behind also preserved medical support for civilians if the marching army returned badly wounded. The first undead wave at Grey Fortress forced rebels to reveal positions before Stormwind committed living soldiers. Nine Suns Burst gave Levy a ranged answer against professionals, who assumed his night presence meant close combat only. Osmer's Berserk Potions increased enemy aggression, but also made controlled retreat and coordinated defense harder once formations broke. The victory again carried a brutal bill. More than 160 Stormwind soldiers died. Another 13 were permanently disabled, and 24 professionals were among the dead. Victor's cavalry also suffered losses, proving even successful elite charges consumed people Stormwind had spent years training. Parker compiled Levy's personal achievements before Fortress clerks completed the broader kingdom accounting. The entire battle killed hundreds of Wilderness Brotherhood professionals across several tiers. Stormwind's forces accounted for more than 800 Berserk cultists and over 12,000 ordinary rebels. Levy's merit awards included a third-class merit, a fourth-class merit, and several smaller distinctions. Wendy received a fifth-class merit for battlefield support performed during the operation. Levy also learned how cheaply the kingdom valued surrendered serfs when converting them into formal military merit. That calculation reinforced his belief that population was more valuable as future taxpayers, workers, and soldiers than paperwork. One captured treasure could help a fifth-tier warrior break through. While improving bloodline potential, Levy reserved that resource for Stormwind's strongest White Wolf warrior, rather than selling it for immediate gold. Church and royal experts arrived later, carrying relics designed specifically to counter high-tier cult sorcery. A ninth-tier archmage joined the cleanup with a divine artifact, while ordinary troops secured lower-level targets. Ninth-tier evil mage died during those operations, while other top threats escaped the royal net. Levy collected additional merit, without pretending Stormwind had personally defeated every powerful cult leader. Once the region stabilized, he led his troops home before another distant crisis could absorb them indefinitely. During the following period, Mia finally pushed the White Wolf warrior path into the 6th tier. Stormwind now possessed another high-level professional who did not belong to an outside noble house. Soon afterward, a 7th-tier half-elf mage arrived riding a 5th-tier Pegasus and opened new contacts around Wendy. At the same time, Stormwind's experiments with sugarcane finally produced something people actually enjoyed consuming. Wendy, Amy, and Mia became enthusiastic testers, which told Levy more about commercial potential than another report could. He expanded the project because peaceful products were becoming strategic tools for funding military growth. A wounded flying lion later appeared near the territory, creating another opportunity to obtain an expensive aerial magical beast. Levy used gravity and layered restraints to pull it down without destroying the damaged wing. The creature hit the ground hard, but Wendy's treatment preserved the possibility of recovery and future taming. Levy again chose capture over harvesting because a living bloodline could produce value repeatedly. Reports about hidden cult methods soon interrupted those quieter projects. Brian described techniques similar to the Scythe King's strange insect abilities and sign of sense sleepers inside the kingdom. Levy concluded that someone with access to dangerous professional power might be building a much larger internal network. He refused to chase the entire conspiracy personally before securing the territory under his direct responsibility. Stormwind's population had grown too large for Levy to personally identify every spy or dangerous mind. He ordered local administrators to encourage reporting and treat confirmed cult-linked sleepers as security threats. The goal was not paranoia for its own sake, but preventing professional infiltrators from living anonymously beside critical workshops. Leva passed broader warnings to institutions, strong enough to investigate capital politics, and returned focus to frontier strength. Then workers discovered strange black liquid near Stormwind, and Levy recognized something Noah's locals did not understand. His knowledge from another world identified substances as petroleum, rather than useless dirty water. Levy could not reproduce a modern refinery from memory, so he avoided pretending partial knowledge was a complete solution. He demonstrated that the material burned and explained possible outputs, such as asphalt, gasoline, and diesel. John treated those ideas as research directions, rather than finished formulas, and began testing what local alchemy could achieve. Levy ordered every enemy who knew the exact deposit location removed before the resource became public. Earth magic converted natural caves near Panda's residence into sealed storage areas for the extracted oil. After repeated transport, the hidden depots held roughly 3,000 tons of crude material. Petroleum became another example of Levy turning incomplete modern knowledge into questions local specialists could actually solve. After the rebel battle, merit clerks converted deaths, captures, and surrendered populations into a bureaucracy Levy found disturbingly cold. 40 surrendered serfs could be exchanged for only one low-class merit, barely comparable to their long-term economic value. Levy preferred moving captured populations into productive settlements whenever law and logistics allowed. Roughly 24,000 serfs were eventually escorted towards Stormwind under infantry protection. Winter made the transfer urgent because the delay meant frozen bodies on mountain roads rather than orderly resettlement. Levy chose overcrowded villages and temporary shortages over leaving people exposed outside the territory. Church forces hunting surviving cultists carried relics designed to resist curses, possession, and other specialized sorcery. Levy encouraged Klein to take formal command where possible so merit remained attached to frontier officers rather than distant nobles. The captured breakthrough fruit reserved for White Wolf development eventually supported Mia's climb toward the 6th tier. Her advancement gave the demi-human community a visible example that Stormwind's service contracts could lead to real opportunity. The half-elf visitor arriving on Pegasus also broadened Wendy's connection to people beyond Stormwind's human political networks. Sugarcane testing moved from curiosity toward production. Once repeated batches proved the territory could create consistent sweetness. Levy saw commercial value because even high-level professionals who ignored cheap goods still enjoyed luxury food. The wounded flying lion could travel roughly 5 kilometers before exhaustion when its wing was healthy. That range made even one tamed aerial beast useful for reconnaissance, emergency medicine, and messenger work. Brian's reports linked cult activity with insect-based methods Levy had seen around the Scythe King's network. Levy separated confirmed local threats from speculative kingdom-wide conclusions to avoid arresting people based on rumor alone. Stormwind administrators were told to investigate patterns, not simply punish anyone neighbors disliked. Professional spies remained the real concern because one hidden mage could sabotage a workshop or formation before detection. Levy sent evidence upward, precisely because the Crown and Dawn Church possessed investigators he could not reproduce locally. Petroleum discovery arrived from ordinary labor, rather than a magical expedition, making it easy for locals to underestimate. Levy's modern memory supplied categories and possibilities, not exact refining temperatures or industrial machinery. John's alchemical research, therefore, started with controlled burning, separation tests, and material behavior instead of fantasy-level shortcuts. Oil storage near Panda's residence also discouraged casual thieves who might otherwise investigate strange guarded caves. 3,000 tons sounded like wealth, but Levy treated it as dangerous inventory until useful refining methods existed. Not long afterward, Panda returned from months of exploring with the lava dragon and brought news of an ancient ruin. The entrance responded to magical structures and formations rather than brute strength, giving Levy a reason to join. Panda also explained that a Lion King had already stolen an 8th-tier life crystal from the area. That detail convinced Levy the ruin contained resources valuable even to creatures above his current realm. He still refused to promise that a 5th-tier mage could casually dismantle an ancient legendary formation. Levy's advantage was breadth. His chaos path gave him affinities across 10 elements that most specialists never possessed. The lava dragon Andreas arrived with Figgle and 2 7th-tier half-elf archmages to form a temporary exploration group. Panda and Andreas started arguing almost immediately, forcing Figgle to delay treasure negotiation until the two beasts calmed down. Levy studied the entrance with the experienced array master. Instead of joining their pride contest, his broad comprehension impressed Figgle enough that the magical discussion continued after the Saint Realm beasts stopped mocking each other. Eventually, the dimensional barrier opened, but there were no glittering treasure halls waiting on the other side. The group entered a dead landscape filled with ruined buildings under an atmosphere separated from Noah's normal world. The first major obstacle was a dark forest, where even Panda and Andreas lost confidence in their supernatural senses. Lev noticed signs that living creatures were watching through whatever force interfered with high-level perception. A coordinated wave of more than 50 mutated beasts soon surrounded the exploration team. Several creatures could cast spells, while others deliberately targeted Levy instead of charging the strongest opponents. That behavior proved the monsters possessed more intelligence than ordinary mutated animals. The group fought through the assault and forced the surviving creatures back into the forest. Nearly 20 mutated corpses remained behind, giving Levy a chance to investigate their unnatural construction. He opened one body afterward, searching for embedded artifacts, cores, or evidence of ancient wizard experimentation. Then his danger warning activated even while Panda stood beside him, which immediately made Levy stop treating the area casually. Ice exploded upward and a humanoid corpse, roughly 15 meters tall, tore itself free from the ground. The ancient body absorbed punishment that would have erased ordinary high-tier creatures without showing proportional damage. Panda and Andreas eventually helped bring the corpse down after a fight that justified every warning around the ruin. When Panda opened the chest, the group found a 9th-tier life crystal, roughly the size of a human head. Even Andreas hesitated, because the crystal was valuable enough to affect the future of Saint Realm bloodlines. Figgle's half-elf heritage had become the ceiling preventing her path from reaching the 9th tier. The crystal could strengthen that bloodline and potentially remove the barrier she had been unable to cross. Levy agreed to let the resource support that breakthrough, rather than demanding a share that offered him less immediate value. Andreas accepted as well, turning one dead ancient guardian into a future shift in regional power. Figgle thanked them with none of her earlier amusement because the gift could change the remaining direction of her life. Deeper inside, records exposed pieces of an ancient wizard society, far more advanced than modern northern magical education. One source described systems where broad elemental affinity was developed deliberately instead of treated as an inefficient curiosity. That mattered to Levy because modern mages considered 10-element cultivation almost impossible to manage effectively. The ruins suggested his system-enhanced path had historical precedence, even if the old methods were largely lost. Another level contained an 8th-tier alchemical dragon, guarding access to deeper structures. During the exploration, a 7th-tier soul attacked Levy directly and disappeared into his systems instead of possessing him. Panda sensed something wrong and carried Levy away from the most dangerous floors before another spiritual attack arrived. He warned that safe treasure hunting ended once 9th-tier ghosts were capable of injuring dragons. Levy accepted the retreat because collecting information alive mattered more than forcing one additional chamber. Among the recovered resources were dragon blood fruits, with enormous value to subdragon and true dragon bloodlines. The fruit could improve blood purity, raise future advancement potential, and sometimes awaken inherited talent spells. Even a 9th-tier pure-blood dragon could gain from that improvement, making the fruit politically sensitive treasure. Levites also received several 7th-tier items, additional 6th-tier resources, and numerous 5th and 4th-tier treasures. 2 7th-tier selections were specifically useful for breaking through warrior and knight bottlenecks. He reserved the warrior resource for Mia once her cultivation reached the correct stage. Klein could later borrow the knight resource when his own path finally reached the same. Levy chose 2 7th-tier life crystals for Wendy and Amy because both carried first-generation half-elf bloodlines. Those crystals could raise their ceilings toward the 9th tier instead of leaving talent trapped beneath inherited limits. Ancient magical knowledge interested Levy even more than individual treasure because Stormwind now possessed an academy capable of preserving it. A dead wizard's method could become a system taught to generations instead of disappearing after one lucky explorer learned it. Levy also studied a body refining route built around wizard techniques, another path the system could improve with attribute resources. Panda claimed he found the ancient ruin while searching for useful potion fruits, which Levy found suspiciously convenient. The dimensional entrance sat near a deserted island north of Stormwind, separating the ruin from normal travel routes. 2 9th-tier sacred beasts had already failed to force the entrance, proving raw strength was not the correct key. Levy examined multi-element patterns, unlike the modern arrays he had studied in noble and church records. His 10 affinities let him recognize connections specialists might miss because they usually approached formations through one element. Figgle provided experience where Levy lacked historical context, turning the opening process into genuine collaboration. Inside, perception interference made Panda's strength less comforting because danger could approach without normal Saint Realm warning. The mutated beasts coordinated attacks toward Levy because the formation work had already marked him as strategically important. After the first wave, the team refused to chase survivors into the forest, where visibility favored whatever controlled them. The giant corpse beneath the ice triggered Levy's danger warning before its full body became visible. Panda and Andreas relied on overwhelming force. Only after the group understood the ancient construct would not fall through careful probing. Figel worked on protective structures around the life crystal before anyone tried claiming the treasure. The ninth-tier crystal had survived because ancient systems continued feeding and protecting the corpse long after its creators vanished. Levy valued that maintenance principle as much as the treasure because Stormwind wanted infrastructure capable of outliving individual experts. Ancient wizard records implied modern magical orthodoxy represented only one surviving branch of a much broader historical system. The seventh-tier soul attacking Levy repeated the same spiritual mistake the Necromancer had made earlier. His system consumed the threat before it could establish control, reinforcing the spiritual sea as another hidden defensive advantage. Dragon Blood Fruit could improve both purity and inherited talent, making distribution politic more dangerous than selling ordinary equipment. Levy kept the strongest bloodline resources inside trusted circles rather than advertising them through open auctions. Every item recovered from the ruin was cataloged by future use before anyone decided whether it should be consumed, loaned, or stored. Once the expedition ended, he returned home and secured sensitive discoveries before neighboring nobles learned what had been found. The coastline was becoming too important to treat only as a fishing boundary and magical beast hunting ground. Levy wanted ships capable of moving soldiers, cargo, and industrial materials between Stormwind's islands and external markets. He traveled to Grey Fortress and met Quint, the slave trader, who had once treated him like a desperate frontier customer. Quint's politeness had improved dramatically now that Levy controlled a vice county and traveled beside Ancient Realm allies. Levy asked specifically for enslaved crafters, experienced in constructing large seagoing vessels. Instead of bargaining over tiny quantities, he placed 50,000 gold coins behind the request. He warned Quint that theft, fraudulent accounting, or deliberate failure would end a relationship that had become profitable for both sides. Buying shipbuilding expertise was cheaper than waiting generations for Stormwind to rediscover the same knowledge through trial and error. Levy remained near Grey Fortress afterward and continued practicing water magic while the transaction developed. When Klein achieved another breakthrough, Levy congratulated him and immediately shifted their conversation toward copper mine security. The mine had become valuable enough to attract pressure from nobles who considered the Grey Mountains part of their political sphere. The Dalton family used subordinate nobles to argue that Stormwind should abandon its claims before this dispute escalated. A sixth-tier gold knight delivered that warning, with enough arrogance to assume Levy would retreat from rank alone. One hostile sixth-tier fighter soon died after learning Stormwind's cavalry officers no longer behaved like minor frontier retainers. Garford entered the confrontation with seventh-tier power and expected his realm advantage to decide the outcome. Levy deliberately met the enemy near the mine, so a professional battle would not spread towards civilians and workshops. Brennus and other tulip-linked observers were present, making every strike part of a larger noble conflict. Klein intercepted one seventh-tier Earth Warrior before that flank could collapse onto Stormwind's mounted units. Levy combined newly learned spell structures with system-enhanced talents against the other high-level opponent. The enemy had prepared for an earlier version of Levy and died fighting someone whose toolkit had already changed. Once the seventh-tier professionals lost momentum, the lower-ranking force stopped functioning as a coherent threat. Stormwind captured 34 enemies while the rest were killed, scattered, or forced away from the mine. Brennus understood that the Dalton side could not simply launch unrestricted war against a viscount without inviting royal intervention. Klein returned quickly to Grey Fortress because Levy suspected the mine clash might be only one part of a wider provocation. That night, Levy spent energy essence from 2 slain 7th-tier enemies instead of leaving valuable growth unused. New defensive changes spread across his body as the upgraded talent settled into his existing knight and mage foundation. Then political confirmation arrived. Tulip and Dalton had formally entered a sanctioned noble duel. Mia asked whether Stormwind should march immediately to support Angelus and the Tulip side. Levy refused because Stormwind did not possess enough strength to choose another family's battlefield without exposing its own people. Reports soon showed noble conflicts, spreading far beyond Tulip and Dalton with suspicious timing. Multiple powerful families were suddenly fighting as though someone kept igniting disputes across the kingdom on purpose, and Sasson spelled. The pattern made Levy's earlier concerns about a ducal-level conspiracy far harder to dismiss. He decided the royal family and Church of Dawn needed at least part of the evidence Stormwind had collected. Levy warned that he had found signs of coordinated internal destabilization, but still lacked proof suitable for a formal accusation. He asked both institutions to investigate before hidden actors converted noble rivalry into open nationwide rebellion. Stormwind prepared locally by strengthening methods for restraining high-level professionals rather than relying only on killing them quickly. Levy also expanded research into ancient potions and medical supplies because political war could bring disease as easily as soldiers. A plague could destroy farmers without siege weapons, so food security and medicine became part of defense planning. Another ancient artifact entered testing during this period and added further body enhancement to Levy's already layered foundation. Talents, body refining, night cultivation, and mage power were beginning to reinforce one another, instead of developing separately. Levy gathered Stormwind's core officers during the temporary calm and reviewed how much each branch had changed. He knew surviving together did not automatically create permanent loyalty. Once richer outside factions started offering alternatives, promotions, academy access, resources, and land-connected capable officers' futures directly to Stormwind's continued success. After those rewards were distributed, a messenger arrived, carrying an urgent letter from Klein. Levy recognized the handwriting immediately and understood Grey Fortress had encountered something too serious for ordinary reporting channels. Klein had sent the message to Stormwind because Levy was one of the few nearby people connected to a 9th-tier ally. Levy folded the letter, found Panda, and left before politics inside the fortress could turn into open killing. Levy's shipbuilding purchase targeted masters who understood keels, large hulls, rigging, and organized yard production. He wanted Stormwind to absorb knowledge from several craftsmen so one person's death could not collapse the entire program. Quint accepted the enormous order because Levy had become too profitable to treat like the disposable customer from earlier years. Water magic practice near Grey Fortress also supported Levy's future interest in coastal warfare and transport. The copper mine dispute threatened more than ore. Losing it would make Stormwind dependent on outside metal suppliers. Levy chose an ambush site where high-level combat could not destroy miners' homes or storage facilities. Brennus's presence ensured both Tulip and Dalton observers could later confirm who had initiated the armed confrontation. Klein's interception prevented two 7th-tier fighters from combining pressure on Levy at once. During the battle, one upgraded talent interfered with enemy recovery after Levy successfully made the target bleed. That effect meant regenerating monsters, and warriors could no longer assume time automatically favored them. The system fence then revealed an even more important defensive card connected to resurrection. Immortal Ashes could preserve one final chance after a fatal wound, provided Levy was not completely annihilated. He treated that ability as insurance, not permission to fight recklessly against enemies several realms above him. 34 prisoners gave Stormwind bargaining power and witnesses when the Dalton side tried controlling the political narrative. Levy's new molten-looking defensive changes settled across his arms and chest after spending essence from the 7th-tier kills. The noble duel between Tulip and Dalton transformed one mine dispute into a conflict capable of draining entire family networks. Levy refused immediate intervention because supporting Angelus meant entering a battlefield chosen by people stronger and richer than Stormwind. Instead, he gathered signs from multiple noble wars and looked for the common actor benefiting from simultaneous instability. His warning to the crown, carefully separated, confirmed infiltration methods from suspicions about which duke might be involved. Preparing anti-plague resources reflected another lesson from war. An enemy could attack food production without crossing a wall. Ancient wizard potions also offered Stormwind methods for growth that did not depend entirely on modern noble supply chains. Officer rewards included cultivation resources, academy benefits, and future positions, rather than one-time cash alone. That structure made loyalty economically rational, even for talented people who could receive outside offers. Klein's emergency letter bypassed normal channels because ordinary royal seals had become part of the problem during the coup. Levy left quickly because a delayed response could let one faction seize Grey Fortress's crossbows before anyone verified authority. Somebody had declared Prince Paul king, while Edward II's fate remained uncertain. The faction controlling Grey Fortress expected the northern frontier to accept that political change through military authority. A commander named Dang demanded custody of 7th-tier magical crossbows and tried consolidating control over the fortress. Levy treated the demand as part of a coup rather than a routine equipment transfer. Panda's arrival destroyed the confidence of reserve troops supporting Dang because Saint Realm pressure made resistance suddenly suicidal. Levy moved through the chaos toward Klein while loyal officers secured critical positions and storage areas. One 6th-tier enemy survived the suppression and ended up inside Levy's domination contract. The improved contract reminded Levy how different past problems might have been if he had possessed current tools years earlier. After stabilizing the fortress, Panda carried him directly toward Viscount Leon instead of returning to Stormwind. Agents aligned with the new regime had already approached Leon and warned him to treat Levy carefully because of Panda. Leon avoided committing to bad information, a restraint Levy appreciated more than performative loyalty during a coup. Levy and Panda returned to Grey Fortress, with questions multiplying faster than confirmed answers. Klein had suppressed the remaining reserve rebellion, but the political crisis outside the walls was still expanding. Prince Arthur announced from Moon City that Paul had murdered the king and seized the throne illegally. The Northeastern Army began preparing to march south in the name of punishing the alleged usurper. Other royal branches issued competing declarations, and each statement came attached to professional armies. Levy looked at the fortress map and realized every major road could become a civil war supply route. Instead of pledging Stormwind immediately, he returned to cultivation while gathering information no faction could easily manipulate. That period finally carried his magic into the 6th-tier Archmage realm. Levy now combined 6th-tier magic with 5th-tier Silver Knight power, making his actual combat profile harder to estimate. Energy essence from previous battles remained available for future talent improvements, while new spell circles opened. Reports from the south described Prince Thompson moving with forces linked to Earl Clinton and Warcraft Knight units. Another account named Zachary among the dead and placed Rosier among Saint Realm figures involved in the coup. When the capital turned murderous, surviving royal professionals had split before Paul could seal every exit. 2 Earth Dragon Knight squadrons sacrificed position to delay Saint Realm pursuers and buy escaping forces time. Warnings reached Paul that killing Zachary and escalating the succession fight could leave the victor ruling an emptied royal house. Those warnings failed to stop declarations from becoming mobilization orders across several provinces. The same military system built to resist orcs was now pulling northern soldiers south to fight other humans. Levy worried that outside enemies would notice how many frontier roads and fortresses were being stripped of manpower. Klein received orders to lead the 8th Battalion and mage units back toward Frost Moon City. That movement left Levy temporarily responsible for Grey Fortress and the corridor, protecting his own lands. The irony was impossible to miss. The former exile who once begged there for supplies now controlled its survival. Levy inspected ammunition, formations, food, officers, magical crossbows, and command loyalty before accepting any political request. He refused to let Grey Fortress fall to whichever prince could produce the fastest official-looking forged order. Panda's 9th-tier presence discouraged nearby factions from pressuring Levy directly, but Fasamtrips could not guard every road. Levy demanded guarantees protecting Frostmoon Province and the frontier nobles before committing Stormwind's strength to a claimant. Whoever became king would still need the North functioning afterward, and Levy intended to make that reality part of negotiations. Some southern nobles resented how many kingdom resources had historically flowed toward frontier defense. Levy argued that scattering loyal forces across personal battles would make the entire kingdom easier to fracture. He proposed concentrating the Northeast Legion and 6th Legion with northern forces before larger coalitions completed deployment. Prince Arthur accepted much of the frontier position because losing capable northern viscounts would weaken his own claim. Stormwind's political value had finally caught up with the military value, built through years of survival. Then the Divine Eye Society's leader moved with a Saint Realm mage against Prince Thompson. The assassination strike reached Thompson before his camp could convert battlefield momentum into a secure political position. Once the declared claimant disappeared, royal troops hesitated because continuing the war suddenly looked more like revenge than succession. Several nobles immediately reconsidered which side still offered a future worth risking their armies for. The Phoenix family announced that Paul was Edward's only remaining heir and demanded an end to the fighting. Levy's earlier suspicion about a duke working with the Shadow Network now pointed much more strongly toward Phoenix. Deng's attempt to seize 7th-tier crossbows mattered because those weapons could decide which faction controlled the fortress afterward. Levy focused first on armories, formation centers, and communication points rather than chasing every rebellious reserve soldier. Panda's Saint Realm pressure ended several confrontations without combat, preserving troops Levy might need against outside invasion. The captured 6th-tier warrior gave Levy another channel for understanding how coup orders had spread through military rank sets. Vice Cleon's caution confirmed neighboring lords were also receiving conflicting instructions from different royal factions. Levy treated uncertainty itself as a threat, because acting on one false order could make Stormwind legally rebellious overnight. Arthur's accusation against Paul converted rumors into a formal competing claim, backed by the Northeast Army. Every royal branch that issued a statement also mobilized logistics, turning political language into troop movement within days. Levy's 6th-tier archmage breakthrough occurred while he deliberately avoided binding to an unstable claimant. That advancement expanded spell access without changing his central rule of hiding abilities until circumstances justified revealing them. Reports from the capital described half the Royal Mage Order escaping before Paul's supporters secured every route. Earth Dragon Knights bought that escape with direct resistance against Saint Realm pursuers outside the city. Their sacrifice preserved professionals who could later determine whether any claimant actually controlled the kingdom. Levy's concern about orcs was practical. Northern withdrawals created the exact gaps previous invasions had exploited. Grey Fortress could not be emptied, simply because princes wanted more troops near the capital. He therefore negotiated from the position that frontier defense was a kingdom service, not personal disobedience. Arthur needed northern cooperation enough to accept conditions that a weaker Levy could never have demanded years earlier. Stormwind's 9th-tier ally made threats expensive, while its artillery and professionals made cooperation useful. Thompson's campaign looked capable of forcing a decision until the Divine Eye Society struck directly at the claimant. The assassination removed political purpose from units that had joined specifically to support Thompson's succession. Phoenix immediately pushed for peace around Paul, benefiting faster than most families could adjust to Thompson's disappearance. That timing strengthened Levy's suspicion that the Duke-level shadow behind earlier unrest might be Phoenix-connected. Still, suspicion was not proof, so Levy continued protecting Grey Fortress rather than declaring a private war on a ducal house. His priority remained keeping Stormwind, Frostmoon Province, and the Northern Corridor functional. While the court consumed itself, each forge or conflicting order was checked against troop movement and known loyalties before Levy allowed resources to leave. Inside the royal conflict, Pix confronted Rosier over why Saint Realm professionals had helped turn succession into a bloodbath. Rosier insisted he wanted to stop the Narrant family from destroying itself, despite his role in the coup. Pix attacked the hypocrisy, because Zachary had already been killed, and the kingdom was splitting across provinces. Rosier's explanation revealed resentment that predated the current succession crisis by many years. He had never forgiven what happened to Farmer, a talent he believed might have reached 9th tier, or even legendary. Arthur had received placement inside the elite 1st Battalion of the Northeast Army. Farmer, by contrast, had been sent toward the dangerous Grey Fortress, and eventually died there. Rosier believed Redmond had favored Arthur because Farmer's talent threatened the advancement of better-connected nobles. He also questioned where Javi had obtained a 9th-tier breakthrough resource, unsupported by his visible military merits. To Rosier, the coup was partly an attack against accumulated privilege inside the royal system. Pix warned that killing Redmond could simply remove one faction and leave Phoenix positioned to dominate the vacuum. Rosier answered that his alliance with outside forces was temporary, and the Narrant family could repair itself afterward. Before that argument could settle anything, both 9th-tier professionals sensed a familiar Saints Out realm presence approaching. The man stepping through spatial distortion was someone the entire kingdom believed had already died. Zachary appeared alive on the battlefield, instantly breaking assumptions that had driven much of the Civil War. His sacred technique was tied closely enough to his identity that neither veteran could dismiss him as an imposter. If Zachary had survived, then events inside the capital had been allowed to develop under far more controlled conditions than reported. The possibility that Edward himself knew part of the plan made the coup look less like chaos and more like layered bait. Zachary ordered Rosier to return and secure the Central Legion and Royal Mage Order for the Narrant family. Rosier insisted he had never intended to destroy the royal family itself, only remove the influence he believed had corrupted it. Yet, the kingdom's public story still claimed Thompson was dead, while Paul remained the surviving heir. That meant armies across the country were making irreversible decisions, using information already proven incomplete. Far north, Levy continued holding Grey Fortress while official orders arrived carrying seals he could no longer trust automatically. He had spent years learning how to survive enemies coming openly through mountains, rivers, and hell passages. The Civil Force War introduced a different threat. Soldiers in familiar uniforms carrying perfectly legal commands from uncertain authorities. Stormwind could no longer treat court politics as distant noise behind the safer logic of frontier defense. Rosier's argument centered on institutional favoritism, rather than a simple desire to place Paul on the throne. He believed Farmer had been deliberately assigned to dangerous frontier service, while Arthur received safer elite advancement opportunities. Farmer's death at Grey Fortress became the personal wound through which Rosier interpreted years of royal decisions. Javi's later breakthrough resource looks suspicious because Rosier could not connect it with publicly recorded merit. Hicks understood the resentment, but rejected Saint Realm murder as a method for reforming the royal family. Both men also recognized Phoenix could exploit their rebellion without sharing any of their original grievances. That made the alliance structurally unstable, even before Zachary reappeared. Zachary's arrival proved at least one foundational fact used to justify the coup had been false. His unique sacred technique removed the easiest explanation that the returning man was merely an illusion or disguised substitute. If Edward had known Zachary survived, then parts of the royal response may have been testing who moved once power appeared vacant. Rosier now faced the possibility that his conspiracy had been observed and redirected by people he believed he was outmaneuvering. Zachary's order to secure the Central Legion prioritized preserving royal institutions over immediate personal revenge. That command also offered Rosier a path back toward the family he claimed he never intended to destroy. Phoenix's public peace demand became more suspicious once hidden survivors proved the succession narrative was incomplete. Levy did not know every secret unfolding in the south, but the consequences reached Grey Fortress through every new order. His earlier wars had clear borders. Wolves crossed a valley, orcs crossed roads, demons crossed a passage. The Civil War had no comparable boundary, because loyalty could change inside the barracks overnight. Stormwind's intelligence network, therefore, became as important as artillery, Undead, or Panda's raw strength. Levy kept NIS, dominated agents, allied officers, and official reports separated, so one compromised source could not define reality. That habit came directly from years of surviving organizations that attacked through infiltration before open force. Grey Fortress remained supplied because Levy refused to release food and weapons until command authority was verified. Stormwind's civilians were safer precisely because their lord resisted the pressure to chase every southern political battle. His new realms and talents gave him more options, but the kingdom's crisis could not be solved by one powerful duel. By the reference stopping point, Levy controlled a stronger territory, while facing a state whose internal rules were becoming unreliable. The threat had moved from surviving the frontier to deciding which institutions were still worth trusting with Stormwind's future. Panda's contract tied personal survival to diplomacy with a Saint Realm beast for potentially centuries. The Academy tied fallen soldiers' families to a future Stormwind could train instead of merely mourn. Artillery tied frontier engineering to royal politics, making every workshop both an asset and a target. Petroleum and shipbuilding tied peaceful growth to resources no battlefield merit system could provide. The Civil War now threatened every one of those projects, without needing to breach Stormwind's walls directly. Levy therefore held Grey Fortress as a shield for civilians, trade routes, and the institutions he had spent years building. He had no reason to trust Phoenix, simply because it demanded peace, and no reason to trust rebellion, simply because it claimed reform. Zachary's survival-proof certainty was dangerous when powerful factions controlled what the kingdom was allowed to know. The Phoenix family's role had finally moved from Levy's suspicion into the center of the kingdom's crisis. For now, he kept the northern gate secure and refused to gamble his people on a story that was still changing.